Hi, this is Stephanie Lotvin of Tellybean Knits, and today I want to show you how to pick up stitches for the lining of your mitten. I have completed the outer portion of my mitten and I'm ready to start lining the inside of my mitten. I have already woven in all of my ends, so I won't have to fuss with those later, and I am ready to start my lining. So for this tutorial, you're going to need your lining color. You're going to need your knitting needles appropriate for the gauge that you need in order to work your lining. The outer portion is worked in color work and the inner portion is worked in stockinette. And so I am actually going down 2 needle sizes in order to work the lining portion of my mitten, but you need to check what gauge you are able to get when you're working in stockinette in the round on your small circumference needles, whether they be something like what I'm using, a 9-inch circular double pointed needles, or if you're working in magic loop. So let's get started. What we're going to be looking for is the purl bumps created by the CC2 round we did at the beginning of the cuff and thumb gusset chart. So if you look closely here, my CC2 is this deep blue, and you can see that there are little purl bumps created when I worked that first round in my CC2. And I'm going to be picking up a stitch for every single one of those CC2 stitches. To do that, I'm just going to flip my ribbing outward so that I can see the outside of my colorwork motif and I can see the top edge where the ribbing meets the colorwork. That makes those CC2 purl bumps really visible, and that's going to make those easier to pick up and knit. The other thing I need to locate is where I originally had my beginning of the round marker. So whenever I cast on my ribbing, I placed a beginning of the round marker, and then I worked along that beginning of the round marker as I worked up through my color work. And so I just need to find the place where I originally cast on, where I created my slip knot and placed my beginning of the round marker. There are 2 ways that you can look for this. First of all, look for the ends that you've woven in. So I have all of my ends woven in here, and so I know that where I originally created my slip stitch or where I started my cast on is going to be right around this area. For me, that's going to be right here. And another way that you can find this is the thumb gusset stitches have a line of CC2 stitches running along that edge. So there's 2 edges. There's one CC2 line that runs vertically that is along the increases for the thumb gusset. And then there's a second one that is worked where the beginning of the round marker is. You don't want to locate the one where those increases were worked. You'd like to find the other one. That vertical CC2 line, it points to the place where you originally had your beginning of the round marker. Whether you're working the left mitten or the right mitten, that line that does not have the thumb gusset increases is going to be the line that's going to indicate where you originally started and placed your beginning of the round marker. So another thing you can look for is there will likely be a tiny jog whenever you change from your ribbing to your color work. That will make it so that when you look at those purl bumps, one will be slightly higher than the other. We are going to start where that little step is, where that little jog is, because I know that this stitch, this purl bump that's slightly higher than this purl bump, that's where I started my round, and that's where I'm going to begin picking up stitches. So with my ribbing flipped over so that I can see the inside of my ribbing and those CC2 purl bumps, I'm going to grab my small circumference knitting needles for my lining, and I'm going to insert my needle from bottom to top into that purl bump. I'm going to grab my lining color, and then I'm going to knit that stitch. Give yourself a little grace here because picking up that first stitch can be a little bit tricky. Let me come in a little closer so you can see a little better. You can see I've picked up 1 stitch, and I'm just going to move my tail out of the way. As I pick up 1 stitch, it may tighten the next stitch where I need to pick up into the next stitch. And so you may need to use the tip of your needle to just dig around a little to pick up that stitch, and make sure you are only picking up that stitch. If you catch another stitch in the ribbing color here, you might wind up seeing it on the right side of your work. You can see there's a little gleam of metal on the right side of my work. If I see that little gleam of metal, then it's very likely I'm going to see the lining color pull through. But if I'm careful and I just pick up the purl stitch in CC2, then you should not see the lining color on the right side of your work. So I'm just going to go ahead and knit that stitch. I'm inserting my needle from bottom to top into every purl bump in CC2 all the way around. So I'm just going to work around carefully, inserting from bottom to top to pick up the stitch and then knit it. And I'll work all the way around the circumference of my mitten. Okay, I've come back to the final stitch. I'm just going to go ahead and pick that up. And now that I've picked up all of my stitches, let me show you what that looks like. I've picked up all of my stitches all the way around the circumference of my outer mitten, and I'm ready to begin working in the round in stockinette. Now, before you move on to working in stockinette, I recommend just checking the number of stitches that you have on your needles to make sure that you've picked up the appropriate number of stitches. If you find that you don't have the correct number of stitches, you can just gently tug that apart and look and see if you're finding any gaps along the way as you worked around. If you missed anything, if you accidentally picked up a stitch maybe in the ribbon color, or if you accidentally picked up one of the floats that was nearby and gave yourself an extra stitch. Now give yourself some grace here. If you find that you're down a stitch or you've accidentally done one too many stitches, you can rip those back out, but you can also cheat just a little bit by adding in an increase or a quick decrease, because remember, this lining is going to be stuffed in your mitten. You're the only person that's going to see it, and it's always good to enjoy the process and not tear your hair out if you're having some kind of trouble just picking up stitches. If you're knitting something like a lining, it's really about being practical and not so much about being perfect. So enjoy the process while you are working on these mittens. And once you have finished picking up all of those stitches, make sure you place your beginning of the round marker, and then you are ready to start working in stockinette. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Thank you so much for watching.